In today's math lesson, we're going to be talking about non-standard units for measuring items. Um, that might be kind of confusing. You might not have ever heard of non-standard units to measure, but we're going to explore a little bit about those items and we'll learn some stuff as we get going through this lesson. But we do have three things today that I want you to understand by the end of the lesson. The first thing is that you're going to be able to tell me about length. Second one says, I can guess the length of an object. So you're going to be able to make a prediction or a good guess about the length of an object. And then we're going to try and see how close your guess is by measuring with non-standard units. So to get started, you can see here, I've got something that we call a tape measure. And you can see I have a ruler over here in the corner. And then I have this pencil laying above this ruler. Now, this tape measure and this ruler are tools that we can use to measure the length of an item. Now it says, what is length? Length, you can see here, I tried to make it so that you could tell what length meant just by looking at this picture. So it could be any object that we want to measure the length or how long it is. So length, or sometimes you might hear the word long. How long is it? Those kind of mean the same thing. So length, long, means if you start at one end of the item, which you can see here, I've started at one end of the pencil, and then you measure basically how far it is to the other end of that object. So you can see we went from the point of the pencil to the end of the eraser. That gives us the length. And this could be anything that you use to measure. You could measure the length of an iPad. You just have to start at one end of the iPad. So if this was our pretend iPad here, we'll put the little button that we use down here, and we'll put the camera up here in the top that we can snap a picture with. And we'll make this, there we go. Not the best iPad, but you kind of get the idea that we could measure the length of the iPad by starting again at one end of the iPad and going clear to the other end of the iPad to figure out how long or what the length of an object is. So we're going to be practicing a little bit about length and measuring with non-standard units, but just to review and remind you, that was one of our goals, is to understand what length is. So if you can remember, it's to start at one end of it and see how far away the other end is. Now, when we don't have like a tape measure or a ruler, we do have some other tools that we could use to actually measure, and those would be what we call non-standard units. And that would be the thing that I talked about at the beginning of this lesson, that we said, well, you might not know exactly what non-standard units are, but that's what we're going to be learning about today. So non-standard units could be really a variety of things. So you can see here in this picture, what we're going to use as a non-standard unit is we're going to use this cube. I could use paper clips to measure. I could use unsharpened pencils to measure. There's a lot of different things that I could use to measure that would be non-standard units. And basically what non-standard units means is it just means that being a non-standard is something that is not the same no matter where you go. So for example, if I wanted to measure with a paper clip, and I went and said, and I called up my pretend friend down in Florida and said, you know what, could you send me a Snickers bar that is 5 paper clips long? My friend might not really know exactly how long that paper clip is. Maybe it's a small paper clip, maybe it's a big paper clip. So non-standard just means that it's an object that you use that is not the same everywhere you go. So to practice, we're going to use a cube for today to practice measuring with non-standard units. So if you see here, I've got a cake. And it says, how many cubes tall is a cake? So I want you to make a guess. If I was to take these cubes and put them over here along the side and stack these cubes on top of each other, how many cubes tall do you think this piece of cake would be? So make a guess in your head. Be thinking of a number. Do you think it's 4 cubes, 5 cubes? Maybe it's 10 cubes. Maybe it's 15 cubes. What number do you have? So go ahead and think of that in your head. So let's measure. There's 1 cube. We'll stack one on top. There would be 2 cubes. Here is 3 cubes. Here would make 4 cubes. So be thinking about the number that you guessed. There's 4. Here comes number 5. And I would say if I drew a straight line out here across this, I would say that that's probably, if we went to that corner, that's pretty close to the very top. So you again could see we had 1 cube down here at the very bottom, then 2, 3, 4, and 5 cubes. So it took us a total of 5 cubes to measure this piece of cake. And again, these were non-standard units, because if I called the bakery and I said, hey, could you make me a piece of cake that is 5 cubes tall, they're probably going to think you're a little bit crazy, because they don't know how tall just one single cube is. So they have no idea how tall this single cube is. So let's try a few more measurements. So you can see here now I'm going to use a mitten as a measurement tool. Instead of cubes, now we've moved over to mittens. And it wants to know how tall would this snowman be. So how tall is it if I started at the very bottom? So I'll put one down here to show you where we're going to start. So if I started down here at the bottom, how many mittens tall do you think this snowman is? You think it's 5, 10? What number? So think about a number, and once we measure, see how close you were. So there's 1 mitten. This would make 2. Here is 3, 4. There's 5. And 6. So you can see if I drew a line across here again, it's going to be really close to being the same. So you can see there that our snowman would be a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 mittens tall. So think about, what was your guess? How close were you? Are you starting to get the hang of guessing? So again, now we've moved over to mittens. And the reason again that this mitten is a non-standard unit is because if you told all your friends that you built a snowman that was 6 mittens tall, they would have no idea if they're talking about one that's really, really tall, or is your snowman really, really short. How big is a mitten? So again, a mitten is a non-standard unit. Last thing that we're going to measure here. Now we're moving on to a rattler. So you can think about something that a baby has, a baby toy, a little rattler that you can shake and make a lot of noise. We're going to measure this milk bottle. So think about, how tall is this milk bottle? If we used a non-standard unit, which is this rattle, how tall do you think it would be if I started down here at the very bottom and was to measure how many rattles would it take for me to stack on top of each other to measure how tall this milk jug is? So think in your head, how many would it be? So let's go ahead and measure. I've got 1. Now this is 2. So you guys can count with me. Here's 3. If we stack it on top, there's 3. And put this one on top, and that would make 4. Here would be 5. This would make 6. This would be 7. And 8. So we could say it looks a little bit more, but it's pretty close. You can see it's very, very close to 8 rattles. So how was your guess? Did you guess 5? Did you guess 10? Were you close? So again, this is another example of how we can use these non-standard units to measure items. So that's going to wrap up today's lesson. Again, we were talking about length. So remember, length would be how to measure an item if you started at one end of it. So for this milk jug, we could start down here at the very bottom to figure out how far away is the other end. That is length. And then we also talked about non-standard units, which are just a way to measure when tools such as a ruler or measuring tape are not available. So they're just different tools that we can use if you don't have a ruler or measuring tape. That's it. Good luck on the quiz.